Welcome back to episode 15 of the Epic Slorm podcast. I'm your host, as always. I am PerryThePig. With me is my co-host here.
Red from Epic Builds, and we got a spicy one for you guys today, folks.
So we've got some footage here on the screen. We've got the Slormancer logo right smack in the middle. We've got some Slormancer gameplay in case you've never seen it before. It's a good time to be playing Slormancer. And Dred and I have been playing this 2D action RPG grind fest game, kind of like Chronicon. We've been playing it ever since the Endgame update that was earlier this week. So we figured if we've been spending so much time playing this game, telling people that it's worth picking up, telling people how much fun it is, making YouTube videos for it as well, we figured that today would be a good time to use this podcast to compare the two games, talk about what's going on in Slormancer. Somehow this game is not as popular as it should be. It's wicked
also
fun.
As well, there's been no last Epoch nudes.
It is no last Epoch nudes, thank goodness.
Oh god, so what have I done?
we don't have too much to talk about in the world of Last Epoch. And Last Epoch's gonna be here next week as well. So we'll always have plenty of things to talk about. But I think for right now, let's talk about my just like, oh man, I don't like early access games, which is weird because I play a lot of Last Epoch. And I don't really like 2D games, and I don't really like pixel art. And if I'm gonna be playing an action RPG, I'm probably gonna be playing like Path of Exile or Last Epoch. So all of those things are going against Slormancer. And yet, this game's fun as hell. It is so much fun to play. So let's start over.
Explain what the game is about, so people.
Yeah. Go ahead and tell me what the game is.
So, Slormancer is a 2D RPG single player title that is the development team is based in France, French game, and you can tell by a lot of the jokes that are around the culture, and it is kind of an RPG that doesn't really take itself seriously per se. It's like the story, the skill choices, just everything.
The names of all the crafting materials.
It's all a big joke, and I love that. I think it adds a very special charm to the game. Now, some people, they may not like the 2D graphics, and some people, they may not like the fact it's going to be a primarily single-player game for most of its life, probably, unless if it blows up for some reason. But overall, the idea is you are either a mage, a hunter, or a warrior, and they might add more classes TLDR later, but you're fighting like Slormancers. So essentially they're just like necromancers in this world, and they use Slorm to summon stuff from the grave and stuff like that. And you take this Slorm and you end up using it to, level up and stuff like that. And Slorm is like the main currency in this world, it seems. And the biggest difference between Slormancer and other RPGs of the genre is how they handle gearing. So obviously, like every other RPG, you have like your helmet slot, your belt slot, all that. But then you have the Slormreaper. So a Slormreaper is essentially, it's kind of like a mini like class / ascendancy in itself.
It's your weapon. It's literally the weapon that you're carrying.
It's your weapon, but it's a lot more than that because there are a lot of them. Right now there's 120 of them, 40 for each class, and they're obviously the same for each class. And each one has a very specific, unique modifier. So the one that I'm currently using in the gameplay right now, it's called the Primordial Staff of Ferocious Affinity. And it, of course, gives me a bunch of mana. It gives me raw damage based on my mana, which is like physical damage. And then it also gives me elemental damage as well based on my mana as well. Now, the way that these work is they level up as you kill things and they unlock more powerful forms. So it's kind of like Pokemon in that way where you're trying to collect all the Slormreapers, right? And it's a very big part of the game because the Slormreapers are insanely powerful and you can legitimately just build around them or not because, of course, you got to remember this is an ARPG after all. You have characters, you have classes, you have skills, you even have akin to like a Path of Exile kind of skill tree with the ancestral legacy tree, which is its own thing. If you like casts on crit, you're gonna love Slormancer because it's absolutely everywhere in the ancestral legacy tree. So overall, Slormancer is a really neat uh, pixel art like ARPG. It's very unique in its flavor.
It's good for like a short 10-hour playthrough. It's good for investing a whole bunch of time. It's good. My one sentence pitch for people who haven't played this game in the past, or maybe they're just hearing about it now, is if when you're playing a game like maybe like you're playing like Diablo, Path of Exile, Last Epoch, if you're the kind of person who looks at a node or looks at an item or looks at one line of text somewhere and you think to yourself, man, I wonder if I can make an entire build around that. If you find yourself saying that, Slormancer is going to scratch so many itches for you because you can. There is support for everything. There is a good gearing process and like crafting process to help you get those weird, lines of text and affixes that you need. And yeah, that means sometimes you're going to find something that's totally busted, but it's a single player game, so who cares? It is so much fun to dive into. Like you said with those Slormreapers, when you find a Slormreaper, like you don't find one every 5 minutes. You find one like, I don't know, maybe like once every half an hour or so if you're intentionally looking for them. But when you find one, it's not an upgrade. You're finding like a new build and you got to figure it out because you don't know the answer yet. So you're finding reasons to play the game and it feels really good to find one of those Slormreapers that you've been looking for.
Yeah, one of the most favorite things I enjoy doing. I've played a bunch of fresh starts of Slormancer of late because I've been testing the game because I've been enjoying it and all that. And one of my favorite things that'll happen is I'm leveling a character right through the campaign, and I end up dropping a Slormreaper that makes me instantly switch my build because it's like, oh, I'm gonna build around this instead, and that happens all the time. You're gonna have so much like anxiety over like what you want to play because there's just so much to do. There's so much to do in that regard.
That reminds me of the anxiety of like League starting in Path of Exile. You're like, oh no, what if the build that I planned was bad? Like, oh no, what am I gonna do?
Well, it's not even that.
It's the good anxiety. I love it.
It's just like, oh my god, I have so many ideas and options, and I just dropped this insane Slormreaper. I could build around it right now. It's like insane. And I really enjoy that. And I think it being a single player game is one of its biggest strengths because it can kind of ignore balance slightly, unlike all the other multiplayer RPGs like PoE and Last Epoch and all that. They can kind of focus more on the fun aspect, and you can tell when you like find a new random thing. Like for instance, the footage that I'm showing right now on the screen, thanks to Perry for figuring that out. TLDR, I'm playing Righteous Fire in Slormancer. It's literally one node on the entire Ancestral Legacy tree. It's not my weapon. It's not my character skills. It's literally just a node, like an aura that I can enable in the Ancestral Legacy tree, and it's doing all of my damage. I'm completely ignoring my skills. I'm completely ignoring my weapon. Well, other than, of course, everything is being focused into this aura, and it's working. It's great. And I'm pretty sure it'll work into Endgame too. And that's the beauty of it, is like I've been able to do that because the game kind of doesn't have any barriers that you normally would, caps, limitations that you normally would in other ARPGs. Like, did you know that, so for gearing in Slormancer, we'll talk about this more later, but TLDR, you can scale gear infinitely. If you have the money, the time, and the RNG, you can scale gear forever. And it is nuts, especially some of the stuff I've seen people do. Now, let's figure out where's this topic list here. We can start.
Well, for the topic list, you're already talking about the first thing, which is build that we're currently playing.
Yeah.
So you really got it in your head that you want to play some kind of RF. I'm like, I get it. I played a lot of RF in Path of Exile. It's a feel-good skill. I like it. So what I'm doing is, listen, I don't really like Whirlwind and Warpath and Cyclone. I don't really like those skills. I feel like they're kind of boring, and every single game has them. So I'm playing it, and it feels really good, man. It feels great.
Well, I think Slormancer does a very special way of making it different.
Well, I'm going to talk about what I like so much about it. somebody asked me, what base class am I playing the most? Like, am I playing the Huntress with the bow? Am I playing the Knight, like the melee and throwing stuff? Am I playing the Mage with all like the big flashy spells? And I said, oh, I'm playing the grappling hook class. That's what I'm really playing. I'm not playing Cyclone. I'm not playing Warpath. I'm playing grappling hook. There's a skill called grappling hook, and instead of tossing it out in one direction, you toss it out in every direction. And instead of pulling yourself to the enemy, you pull all the enemies to you. It's a big old screen wide vacuum cleaner. It lags just a tiny little bit when you pull 400 enemies all on top of your own character and you start blending up with Warpath. Woo! It feels so good. It's like this. It's the kind of thing. It's like, oh, like this action RPG doesn't do melee well. That game doesn't do melee well. This game punishes melee unfairly. The games that feel good with melee give you stuff like this. They give you like a screen wide vacuum, and they give you like, I remember playing Ghost Lore. It was like that Filipino Southeast Asian based action RPG, and there was a skill there that like when you use the basic attack, your character kind of hopped forward. So if you scaled attack speed, you can move faster than you could with movement speed. It's like
Flicker Strike on steroids.
Yeah. And that felt so good to use because you could close the gap constantly while holding down your right click.
I think there's
things like that, just like, oh man, it makes melee feel so good.
There's a perfect example to like compare this to like last Epoch, and that's skills that have inbuilt pull, like Rive, or like how Warpath used to have. Or like, you know, of course, Warcry, where they pull the enemies towards you. I think that's definitely something that a lot of ARPGs should look into to make, you know, of course, melee feel great, because it seems to work. Like a skill with pull on it, like you pull something in, right? And you get to whack it. It feels so much better than having to walk over to that enemy and whack it, right?
Mm-hmm. You can either have built-in movement speed or like built-in movement of the skill, or you can have built-in movement of the enemies toward you in the skill. It's like, you know, opposite side of the same coin. I like it so much.
Yeah.
So the cyclone, I don't even know, is it called Cyclone or Whirlwind?
It's called Whirlwind.
It's called like these all stupid skills are the same. So I'm playing a Whirlwind build based around the haphazard Knight, and he has like a bunch of random procs, and then he's built around like luck and RNG. So you spec into all the luck, you spec into all the RNG, and you just get like all this nonsense happening at the same time. And I found a weapon that I wanted to use. I found a Slormreaper that kind of synergizes with what I want to do. I found something that shoots off some fireworks, part of the new Endgame system with the runes. We'll talk about that later on. And I found something that I wanted, like every piece of my builds, like it's been coming together really nicely. Like I didn't have a perfect idea of what I wanted to do. I was basically saying like, okay, I'm probably going to play Whirlwind. I'm probably going to use Grappling Hook. Let's see where this goes. And as I've been unlocking things, as I've been, learning about these skills, because I've never played Whirlwind before in this game, it's been a great process of figuring out what direction I want to take this and then honing my gear in toward that end.
Yeah, a good last Epoch. I'm going to keep bringing up last Epoch because technically this is a last Epoch podcast. And so one of the comparisons I like to make is like in Slormancer, when I start the game, right, I feel like as though I could choose anything and just play that, right? I can make anything work if I just try hard enough. And in last Epoch, that is definitely not the case. Because, like, imagine you're a new player, right, Perry, and you find Tempest Strike. You're like, oh, I want to play around that. I want to have fun with that. And then
you could name any other skill instead.
I mean, yeah, but you get what I mean, though. Obviously, that's a very small problem in last Epoch, but it's definitely something I've noticed in general.
Well, no, it's a great one because we've talked about like the more multipliers for skills in last Epoch are on the skills themselves, and you can't really get more multipliers outside of those skills. So if you want to play Cinder Strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cinder Strike it's awesome. I love Cinder Strike. It's got everything built into it.
It is one of the best utility skills ever. It's great.
Except for more multipliers. It basically has 0 more multipliers. So if you
Unless you're playing Ignite, then you have like the Ignite thing, the Ignite effect.
If you're trying to play hit-based Cinder Strike into Empowered Monoliths, the skill itself doesn't have more multipliers on it. So it's going to feel great while leveling. It's going to feel really fun. And eventually you're going to think to yourself, man, there's nothing that I can do in order to make this continue dealing damage up until 150 corruption, 200 corruption, Anywhere past 100, really.
Trust us, when we say this, some of the brightest minds in the last Epoch community have put their heads together to try to make Cinder Strike a playable skill.
Well, Cinder Strike is an
Like,
awesome utility skill. It's
outside of
so good.
abusing, decoy and stuff.
So
it's not been a good thing.
Let's talk about leveling, and let's also talk about like alt, like your second and third character that you haven't unlocked yet in Slormancer. What do you want to say about that?
So I'm gonna be honest. Leveling is one of the not strong suits of Slormancer. It is a very slow start. Because one of the biggest problems early on in Slormancer, at least back when I was playing a year ago and now, is when you start, you have no life sustain whatsoever, right? So you walk into like a mission, right, in the campaign, and you take a hit, that's permanent because you have no sustain up until you get something with life regen on it or, life gain on hit. And that slows down the early game progression significantly because now you're playing, haha, don't get hit, haha, don't get hit or you die, And there are some really dangerous mobs in the campaign. Like, the archer dude that like locks in on you? There are some really dangerous enemies in the campaign, and the campaign is rough. Like, it is actually rough. It is like probably the most difficult campaign I've played in.
Is it
RPG
rough
in general?
Engaging, or is it rough annoying? I'm not going to play this game anymore.
A grind. That's what it feels like. It feels like a grind. Like, for instance, if we didn't have access to that Tempobotamus thing, oh my god, the leveling from 20 to 60 would feel terrible because you're forced to do wrath farming and stuff like that. So I think leveling is by far one of the weakest parts of Slormancer currently, and that's probably what contributed the game to not being as popular, right?
So there's a couple things to talk about in the world of like leveling in leveling in Slormancer. And there's some overlap in Last Epoch as well, right? So we can talk about alt characters, we can talk about trying new skills, and we can talk about like leveling up not in the axe, like some kind of like alternate leveling stuff, right? So, man, I feel like I'm only allowed to spend like 30 seconds on each of these because there's so much to say. So leveling up secondary skills. I'm going to start with that because it's on my mind right now.
I can explain how it works if you want.
Yeah, I think that leveling up secondary skills and trying out a new skill, I think that is the single worst part of Slormancer. And I think Last Epoch does a really good job of it. So how about you tell me about that?
So the way Slormancer works is if you've ever played Oblivion or Skyrim or any of, Elder Scroll games, your skills, they gain levels, but they gain experience as you use the skill in combat, right? You can't spam the skill outside of combat. You have to be in combat. You have to be fighting something, and you have to be using the skill. It is solely based, at least it used to be solely based on using your skill. Doesn't matter if your skill deleted the whole screen or if your skill took 50 attacks to kill something. It was the same amount of XP every single time. And I like that. It's more realistic in terms of like you're using a skill, you're getting better at it, you're unlocking ranks and all that. But at the same time, when you're like, oh, I want to try chronopuncture, for instance. And oh my god, one of the worst experiences I've ever had in Slormancer was about a year ago or a year and a half ago when I was playing Chronopuncture Mage. And I wanted to swap to Chronopuncture, but it was at level 0, and I had to use Chronopuncture to play the skill because you gotta use your skill to get levels and ranks so that you can use the nodes inside your tree, kind of like Last Epoch where you have points to spend, right? And TLDR, I spent, I think, 2 hours in that, that one zone where it starts like spawning enemies in an area?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I spent 2 hours attacking the air with Chronopuncture while watching, I can't remember what I was watching.
Maybe I shouldn't bring this up. So there are workarounds in Last Epoch, and there's also workarounds in Slormancer, right? In Last Epoch,
they did fix that though. We can explain that after this.
In Last Epoch, what you can do is, if you want to try out a secondary skill while you're leveling, don't de-level your primary skill. Just level up your new skill in one of your second or third slots, get some levels on it, and then try it out. Or if you want to
do that in Slormancer,
and then if you want to do that in like monoliths, you get some books of experience sitting there in front of you. despec your skill, spec a new skill, and then walk over the tomes of experience in front of you. And that's a great workaround that exists in Last Epoch. The thing that I'm about to say for Slormancer, man, I hope you've thought of it. You can craft plus levels.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, so now you can do this. Now you can craft plus levels to your skills.
That existed back then as well. I just didn't know. But the biggest change that they made was they made it that if you're not using a skill, right, and you're just killing stuff and using other skills and all that, your other skills gain passive XP.
Yeah.
It's a smaller amount, significantly less, but it's definitely good because before you'd have, like Mage that had an ability like the Arcane Barrier that you'd barely ever use in most situations unless you were building around it. But the problem is if you don't use Arcane Barrier, you don't level up your Mastery class. So you're like, okay, I'm just spamming W for like 2 hours.
I'm just going to stand here and click some buttons.
That has completely been fixed by the passive XP thing. They've done, it's like, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to bring this up real quick. I'm going to get on my soapbox. I made a video 2 years ago talking about Slormancer, and I talked about all the negative things that I did not enjoy about Slormancer. Every single one. Apparently, one of the devs, they watch me because they watch Last Epoch stuff, because they play Last Epoch too. They watched that video, and every single thing that I complained about was fixed in a year. The next video I made, the next time I played, when there was another update, the library update, like the one with the the Orin twins and all that, every single complaint I had was fixed. Every single one. And
I'm pretty sure there's only 2 devs,
mind.
right?
There's 3.
Oh, sorry. There's 3 devs for this game. Got it.
It blew my mind. I was just like, oh my God. Like, they legit, like, I don't know if I was special or they just happened to fix all that before when I got back, because years a long time, right, in development land. But it just blew my mind. But continue on. All
right, so we're going to touch on, I think, only one more thing for leveling, and then we're going to keep going through this list of topics today. So the other thing for leveling is alternate leveling, not in the campaign. I like the campaign in Last Epoch, but boy, do people complain about it all the time. So there is alternate leveling built into Slormancer, and there's kind of 2 parts of it. One is one of the endgame systems, and that's the battlefield. So can you tell us a little bit about the battlefield?
So the battlefield is TLDR. It's Slormancer's version of endgame maps. You go in, you clear breaches, which is things you sit on and pop out monsters, and you get rewards per breach you've killed if you finish the Echo. And with Slormancer, it is hardcore in the way where it gives out rewards. Like, if you die, you lose your rewards, man. Like, you're done. It's over. You gotta not die, right? So you have to actually think about your defenses. And with this, like, endgame system, you just go and clear breaches. It's very simple, and I'm okay with that. You just kill stuff, open breaches, that's it. That's all you do, right? And you have a variable slider. You have Wrath's -1 if you're
which is the alternate leveling for super easy.
Or 10, or Wrath 10. And the way these work is they get exponentially harder. So for instance, the first one is 0% modifier, the next one is 100% modifier, the next one's 200, the next one 400, 800, 1600, and it gets all the way up to Wrath 10. And it's exponential difficulty that you get to choose. You get to choose when you feel like it. Now, there are a lot of pros and cons with this system, but overall, I think it works really well. Slormancer, because like Perry said, it lets you level characters in the campaigns. Like, for instance, if you create a new character, you don't need to go through the campaign. You just need to level your character, get your Ancestral Legacy Stones, and you're good to go.
Let's pause this for a second. You have your primary character. Every save file has access to all 3 characters, right? So if my very first character is the Knight, and I've gone through the entire campaign on the Knight, if I use that save file and I go rescue the Huntress, and now I have a level 1 Huntress, that Huntress also has access to everything else that I've already done. All my stash, all my Ancestral Legacy, all of my campaign, save points, and everything. So what you do for leveling an alternate character is you do some battlefield for a while, some -1 difficulty, pretty easy. And then the second thing I want to call out is the Tempopotamus, which it's like I don't know how to describe this to you, Chad.
It's Dried Lake. It's Dried Lake or like BA. It's like Dried Lake or BA.
It's like Dried Lake or Blood Aqueduct on like drugs.
Steroids. Yeah, it is
It's like
nuts.
holy yeah, my god, it's so much. There's 456 monsters or something
Yeah,
like that.
and I hope that they keep that because I enjoy it.
And
Maybe
it's so
nerf it,
it's
but
a
keep
great
it.
place to farm gold or goldus. It's a great place to farm slorm. And like you can farm gold and slorm like the normal green slorm
Yeah,
extraordinarily well there. And you might think like, "Oh, doesn't that push out the other stuff in the game?" No, not really. It's really good at getting experience when you're a new character. It's really good for getting the gold, for getting the slorm, but it's not good for getting pure slorm, for getting elder slorm, for getting new Slormreapers, which is kind of like that new build. It's that weapon that's kind of build defining. It's not good for any of those things. So even though it's like OP when you're level 25 and you get, this
yeah.
much experience
It's
immediately,
balanced. It is
yeah,
very
it's
balanced in that
weirdly
regard.
balanced, even though it kind of feels like your computer's going to explode because you're killing 460 monsters in one click. God, it's fun to play. It's so much
Yeah,
dopamine.
yeah, yeah. Leveling TLDR, it the first time round sucks absolute balls, but afterwards it's great.
All right, well, agree to disagree there, but yeah, I hear where you're coming from. The next conversation piece that we have here, let's talk about skills and classes. I want to know what's on your mind. I think I know what's on your mind, but you tell me first.
The way that they do the classes in this game is very interesting. So when you reach level 10 on your base class, your huntress, your mage, or your warrior, you get to choose a support skill. Now, the support skill is actually a skill that you use in game, as you can tell. Like, for instance, in the little gameplay clip, it's that beam of light that I put down and walk through. And each class has that. Now, as you gain experience on that skill, that's your mastery, like your ascendancy, quote unquote. And you can literally swap your ascendancy literally just by swapping your support skill. Now, obviously, you gotta level it up, like we said, but it's a lot easier to do that now. And you can also, like Perry said as well, you can get plus levels on gear to alleviate that as well.
I
And
don't know
this
why
is,
you would, but you could swap mid gameplay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so easy.
yeah, and it's really good. And each class feels unique. They do things that the other classes can't do. They have their own archetypes, and it feels all very class fantasy good. Like it's all good in that regard. And but the skills, so right now in Slormancer, you can have one skill on your primary, one skill on your offhand or on your other click, and then you have your support skill. That's it. That's all you get, other than ancestral legacies and like active abilities and stuff on your gear. But mainly, you get your primary, your secondary, and your support skill. And that may sound terrible. You must be wondering, well, Dread, in Last Epoch, I get like 5 skills, and Path of Exile, I get 1,000,000,000 as long as I can click the buttons. And no, actually, with the way that Slormancer does its skills, it actually is very unique. Because, like, in a lot of ARPGs, right? Like in Last Epoch or Path of Exile, for instance, if we're going to bring those up, right? You end up only using one skill for everything. Like for clear, for single target, most of the time, except for Last Epoch, it's a little different, right? And you never really need more than that in terms of damage and all that. You just use the rest of your stuff as secondary, kind of like support skills and all that.
Utility, movement.
Yeah. And Slormancer just does away with all that. Now you just have two primary skills, and this allows you to kind of like make a combo of skills that, like for instance, right now, my Ray of Obliteration, it's like Scorching Ray, obviously. And I make it so that it summons a clone that, constantly using Scorching Ray for me. Now, that Scorching Ray does no damage because I haven't invested into it at all. It literally does no damage. Now, what it does though is it gives me a gigantic boost into elemental res and, of course, armor percentage while it's channeling, which is insane because since I'm using Burning Rage to deal all my damage, the RF thing, I can use my skill as a utility skill, and that works in Slormancer as well, like it works in Last Epoch. You can make skills into utility skills or damaging skills, whatever you want to do, but you only have two choices, but each skill has, in my opinion, a lot more options because of the way the skill bar works. So if you don't know, the way the skill bar works is you have ranks of the skill. So you have like 1 through 5 or 1 through 7 and all that. And each bar has like a bunch of like squares to choose from. And each of
And,
those squares is a different like node.
and you're only
you can,
picking one of those, yeah.
you can only pick one per rank. So the game is balanced around the fact that you can't use all of these at once and allows the skill nodes to be insane. Absolutely insane. Right? Like just nut tier, like ridiculous, right? Like for instance, I'm gonna read Arcane Missile real quick. The first two masteries, you have two masteries, masteries, that's what they're called. The first one is Arcane Missile has no cost if you're less than 20% mana. It's like free, right? Insane, right? Now the other one is Arcane Mastery has negative 35% cooldown time, which is attack speed in this world, right? We can get into that later. But TLDR, it makes you attack faster. So you either attack faster or you cost no mana when you're at low mana. You can't have both. You have to choose one, right? And that solves a lot of balance issues, a lot of them. Because now you can just like, well, these two things would be really OP together, right? Instead of having to do like a 0 out of 9, like in Last Epoch, like in Volcanic Orb, or in Path of Exile, they just delete the skill from existence. They just put it on that same rank, bam, balanced. There, you can only choose one per thing.
What you're talking about here, I want to cut you off. It sounds a lot like the phrase illusion of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like you have 5 skills you get to use in Last Epoch, but are you really using Multi-Strike and Vengeance and Warpath and Erasing Strike and Void Cleave? Are you really using 5 main DPS skills? Or do you have 1 DPS skill and then utility movement for the rest of your stuff? That's like Volatile Reversal, Holy Aura, Anomaly, Sigils, all those kinds of things. Shift plus Shurikens, War Cry plus Maelstrom, using your Frenzy Totem. Like these things all fall in the category of, yeah, you have 5 skills, but you're really just maximizing around 1 skill. So here in the world of Slormancer, you have got 2 skills, and you've got lots of choices that you can make about them, but they're only 2 skills, and that's what you're trying to min-max around.
Yeah, and it leads to the gameplay being a lot less choices overall, but each individual choice is significantly more impactful, right?
Yeah, for sure. So let's keep moving. I'm a little bit worried that we're not gonna make it through everything, but let's see if we can. All right.
Yeah.
The next thing is something that we've already kind of touched on. Let's talk about Slormreapers. There's one thing that I definitely want to bring up, but I want to hear what's on your mind first. What's on your mind about Slormreapers?
TLDR, Slormreaper, in my opinion, is the best thing about this game. Since the game is a single player game and it's not like multiplayer or anything like that, the collection aspect of being able to collect the Reapers and own them all and stuff like that and find them and then level them up and then get their primordial versions as well, which we'll get into later. TLDR, it adds a lot of like breath of fresh air to the game that a lot of other ARPGs I play don't really have, because like in Last Epoch, I can do anything I want if I just like spend 5 seconds, but like with this, I have to actually put the work into it. If I want a primordial staff of ferocious affinity, I have to find it, I have to level it up, then it levels, then I have to level it up again. And some of these Reapers, they have to be leveled up, I think like 5 times before you're done with it. And it has that, kind of mystique of like, gotta catch them all. And that, I know it's weird to say in an ARPG, but there's not really that many games in the market that like kind of fix that niche for you for like your collection kind of thing.
It feels like an SSF unique challenge in like Path of Exile.
Yeah, it's like what is it called? The Holy Grail. It's like the Holy Grail for every character. It's great.
And like you want to catch them all. You want to evolve them all, and then you want to. I don't know enough Pokemon lingo. What's a Pokemon lingo for the primordial stuff?
Evolve them, I guess.
Evolve, like dark that. Evolve. I don't know. And so this is what I want to bring up. There is a primordial system, and it's like a final. It's like a hidden upgrade for any of the weapon that you're using, for any of the Slormreaper that you're using. And I really like one of the changes that they introduced to it. So like Dread said, you have like your base weapon, you level it up, you get to like tier 3 or something. And then when you kill somewhere around 40,000 monsters, there will be a primordial like animation that plays, and it'll explain to you what's going on. It tells you like, here's what it is. And a primordial, the change is it's no longer just an upside. It's no longer strictly better. It's got a sweet new upside that has like some interesting build round aspects to it, but it also comes with a downside. Like you get this thing, but you can't, imbue your skills with lightning anymore.
It's a very significant
I think that's really
downside.
cool.
And like for instance, the one I'm using, the Ferocious Affinity staff, I get a bunch of damage based on my max mana, like my max mana value, not like my current mana value. But every single time I use a skill, every single time, any skill, I lose 5% of my current mana. And that can be insane to deal with later on if you're not properly building around it. Now the beautiful thing is you can kind of take that malediction sometimes and turn it into a positive. So right now I'm playing a build that sucks up all my mana with my primordial, Ferocious Affinity, right? Because I get more damage based on how much missing mana I have. So the fact that my primordial malediction on my, freaking Ferocious Affinity staff is draining my mana is a plus and not a minus. And it's nuts that you can do that with some setups, right? Like sometimes you can do that. And that's just mind blowing that I was able to turn a downside into just like, wait, this makes it viable.
Extra spice. Like that's the really exciting part, right? So does this fit in Last Epoch? Is this something that's like remotely interesting to try to talk about in the world of Last Epoch? What if your weapons upgraded? What if they got more base damage? What if you could plus levels on your items so that like the flat melee damage went like 1, 2, 3% higher?
I think the legendary system is a very good replacement for it. Like I like the legendary system. There isn't that progression niche that a lot of other ARPGs have. Like, when you get to level 100 in, Last Epoch, you get your skills to level 20 plus, extra, level plus the skills on your gear. You kind of just don't have anywhere to go other than min-maxing with gear, right? And there's no, I guess, Paragon system, but isn't that system like it? I don't like that system.
I don't think I've never heard anyone say that they like the Paragon system.
This is like the Paragon system, but instead of going on forever, there is a cap, right?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. So the reason that I mentioned Last Epoch here is this is a Last Epoch podcast, but more importantly, the crafting stuff. So one of the common complaints, if you've been around the Last Epoch community for a while, is my gear doesn't matter. I can clear the game naked, and like, yeah, there's some builds that can do that. So when you say gear doesn't matter, what that really means in the world of Last Epoch is the amount of damage and survivability. Like your build is lopsided in Last Epoch. Too much of your gameplay, too much of your power of your character comes from your mastery and from the skills themselves, because that's where the more damage multipliers are. Your gear is, if you only had life and res on all your gear, your gear's kind of okay, which it probably is not what Last Epoch wants to do long term, but that's pretty close to the case right now. So what about crafting in Slormancer? What about where your damage comes from? How easy is it to get like meme builds like what you got going on the screen with this RF thing?
So with Slormancer, it's really hard to explain everything about crafting. Let's just say crafting is very, very complicated. Like I could talk about crafting forever, but I won't. But TLDR, every single thing about your item is subject to change. You want to change the base because you don't like the base anymore that you're using, like the implicits, you can change that. Oh, you don't like the magic stat on your gear, you can change that. You don't like the rare stat on your gear, you can change it. Everything can be changed. And the only limitation in Slormancer in terms of gearing, like in terms of crafting, is of course the crafting materials and oodles and boodles and oogles amounts of money. just money, like crafting materials and money. That is
It's
your
just
only money.
capitalism incarnate. Like, if
It's
you have
grinding.
infinite money, you can do whatever you want.
If you grind for long enough, you can get exactly what you want with the exact rolls, exactly what you want. And the thing is, with Slormancer, there are more damage modifiers. They exist, but they are very rare. And when they do exist, they're very impactful when they come around, and they're not to be just thrown around, right? You won't find like Earthquake with like 50,000 more damage modifiers in it. You do not get more damage modifiers. You have increased damage, you have crit, you have ancestral crit, which we'll get in later, and then like just and that's it. That's all you have. Other than the more damage multipliers, like I said, are very rare. And this leads to gear actually feeling good because one of the best places to get increased damage is either from the tree, which you can't get that much of, your Reaper, which there isn't that much to be found unless you're running a specific Reaper, or of course your gear. Now, if you have a level 60 piece of gear, right? Because there are item levels for gear and it does apply to the rolls, right? You craft increased elemental damage, tier 1. Guess how much you get, Perry? 2%.
20%?
2%. 2.
Oh, 2. Oh my god.
Yes. Increased damage is rare in this game. But the thing is, that 2% damage can be scaled all the way to like 50% increased damage with enough effort and grinding and stuff. So your gear does actually matter 100%. Like increased damage rolls are insane. You get like you get an extra roll on your gear, it's going to feel amazing cuz also as well with the crit too. Crit cap, like in last Epoch, the crit cap's really easy to get with a lot of skills because you get a lot of base crit and all that. With Slormancer, crit works as kind of like what EHG was wanting to do, where they just have base crit, right? That's all they have is base crit.
I've never seen increased critical strike chance in Slormancer. I don't think there is any.
Yeah, no, it doesn't exist.
Huh.
It's just base crit, and it is insanely hard to get crit cap on most things. Insanely hard. It is an investment. And then, of course, on top of that, you have ancestral strikes. What are ancestral strikes? Well, essentially, TL, they're crit on top of your crit.
They're
so,
double
for instance, yeah, they're double crit. So you roll crit, okay, you crit. You roll ancestral critical strike chance, and bam, you hit ancestral crit, and then you get another modifier. This can lead to absolutely insane amounts of damage. But of course, you're scaling crit chance, you're scaling ancestral crit chance, you're scaling crit strike multi, which is a multiplicative modifier to everything, and then you're scaling ancestral crit strike multiplier, which is also a multiplicative modifier. But the thing is, you only have so much room on your gear. You only have so much, and there's only so much of that stuff in the trees. You can only find a certain amount, right? And it leads to gearing feeling impactful because you can't just willy-nilly get those stats. Like, you have to invest into it. You have to focus on getting them.
You need to get those stats where they're actually available, sure. So yeah. what I wanted to point out is like, so I've been playing some Huntress builds, and I've been playing a lot of the melee builds. And like maybe for a Huntress, for a bow build, I'll really want like projectiles pierce, because that scales this other thing and scales this thing. And if only I had pierce chance, it would make the rest of my build work. Or projectiles rebound, or maybe like melee overdrive chance, so it hits additional nearby enemies. Or melee recast chance, which is kind of like multi-strike. If only I had that one stat, it would make the rest of my build tick. It would make other things proc. It would make my build like more coherent. And the crafting system in Slormancer allows me to target that one stat and get it on my gear. If I want it, I'm going to have it. And that feels really good to me.
Yeah,
it's one of those things like the game allows you to build around whatever you want, and having this crafting system in place where you can get the things you want is how it does that.
But the problem with Slormancer, the biggest problem is, first off, it's a single player game, right? So there's no training, anything like that. And it is an absolute grind fest. Once you start seeing the prices, Perry, when you start getting up to like +9, +10 and all that, oh my God, you're going to be like, my wallet's being stolen, I'm being robbed. It is exponential as crap. And it is an absolute grind. It is just an insane grind.
If
And
there's
that is
one
the
thing that I
only
hate
limitation.
about action RPGs, it's playing them. I wish I could just have my endgame gear. I wish I could have perfect stuff all the time.
No, it's great. No, I love it. I love it. No, I love it. I'm just saying that like this isn't for the faint of heart. This is like hours and hours and hours and hours of work. This is nuts, man. Like
So what?
just to add an epic stat on my gear right now, it's like 250k gold, which is a lot.
Exalting an item, slamming a stat, a new stat on something is easily the most expensive thing in the game. That's really hard to do.
Yeah.
All right,
like legendaries. Go ahead.
When you're grinding your butt off and you are spending hours and hours trying to get all the Slorm and Elder Slorm and crafting materials that are in the game now, what are you doing with that time? Let's talk about the end game systems that are here. I tell people that there's like 3.5 end game systems. Technically, there's 3, but the Tempopotamus kind of feels like an end game system. It's that little level 27 zone in the campaign that you just blow up all the monsters and you get that hit of dopamine. That's like half an end game system.
It's like tier 1 maps.
Whoa, it feels so like. Good. Like if you need gold, if you need Slorm, that's the place to be. So there's 3 end game systems. We have the battlefield, which we talked about already. We have like the -1 difficulty all the way up to the insane 10 difficulty. Then we have something that's been in the game for a while called the Temple. Kind of feels like running from point A to.
It's Delve.
Oh, yeah, it does kind of feel like Delve. It feels like the like just running from point A to point B to point C, right, as fast as you can.
Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of upgrades you have to get for it as well.
Yeah, and then the third thing that was just introduced, I think this week, right, is called the Forge. So I want to spend some time talking about the Forge. The gameplay clip on the screen right now is Forge. And the reason that I really want to talk about it is it has some great parallels to last Epoch's Endless Arena. So, Dread, talk to us about the Forge. What's going on here?
All right. So, TLDR, if you've played last Epoch, it is like Arena of Champions. You essentially, in this spot, you choose wave modifiers, but they're actually impactful wave modifiers. Like, for instance, you have Explosion on Death. You have it so that when you hit enemies, they fly out with sparks. You make it so enemies have like recast chances, like multi-strike, and it has so much variability because every single wave you choose a new modifier. It's all great and dandy and all that. And the best thing about it is it actually feels rewarding. It is essentially an arena system like in Grim Dawn or Last Epoch, but actually rewarding, and it is satisfying. It is
so what are the first few things that come to mind when I say like why is it satisfying? If you succeed, you get a ton of crafting materials. So that feels really good.
Out. Yeah, it just pukes out.
What else feels good about it off the top of your head?
Well, just the moment to moment combat, because you could take the modifier that gives enemies insane amounts of HP based on how much like gold that's in your chest. And you can turn your gameplay from like, oh, I'm one-shotting things to like, oh my god, my game is lagging.
So the modifiers that you're selecting, they're not just more health, more damage, more health, more damage, more health, more damage. There's an enemy that'll chase you. There's an enemy that'll chase you that takes no damage until everything else is dead. There's enemies explode when they die after 2 seconds. There's enemies spawn a copy of themselves. Enemies are faster. Enemies do these other things that aren't just life and damage. And if you think about it, like life and damage is a pretty boring way of scaling difficulty in a game. But I really like what's going on here. It reminds me of the kind of spicy modifiers that come with Gunfire Reborn as well, with that new endgame system that they implemented, that Jokel system, where these cool, interesting things happen instead of just more life, more damage, more life, more damage.
Yeah, because the thing is, the Wrath modifier is the more life, more damage modifier, right? Like, that is so with the way the Forge works, it works just like the Battlefield, and it has a baseline difficulty, right? Then you have all 10 Wraths, right? And TLDR, the base stats of the monsters are based on that Wrath. They have gigantic multipliers that makes it so that your build is always being challenged. It's like, oh, wow, wait, Wrath 5 is too easy. I'm doing it too quickly. Yada yada yada. It's not rewarding enough. Bam, Wrath 6. Oh wait, everything just doubled in damage. Everything just doubled in HP. And now it's like, oh, now I gotta do Wrath 6. It feels like an actual progression system. And that's what's great about it, is like it feels like an achievement when you move up a Wrath level because it's significantly more difficult.
It's not just, enemies have 10 damage, enemies have 20 damage, enemies have 30 damage, enemies have 40 damage. Like you
It's
said before, it's
exponential.
nearly exponential. It's like a huge increase for every
Yeah.
step up.
And this game's a numbers game too. Like you gotta you gotta keep up with the numbers.
You got to make sure your build's coherent. And to me, that feels pretty good, right? It's like,
Mhm.
can I get away with playing Tempest Strike for the rest of my life? Or do I have access to difficult content that shows me that my build is lackluster? And that access to difficult content is one of the things I think Last Epoch is failing in right now. Like, there is difficult content, wave 1,000 in the arena is very
I'll
difficult.
be honest. I did T4 Durla a few times on like the Wandering Spirits build.
Okay.
Once you get enough damage and once you like understand the fight enough, it just becomes like just don't stand in the beam and die, and then that's it.
So
And
the
yeah.
access to difficult content, like there is difficult content in Last Epoch, like 1,000 corruption, 1,000 waves in the arena, like monsters hit super hard, they move super fast and stuff like that. But the access to it, are you going to grind arena up to a wave 1,000 just to have that kind of difficulty? Are you going to grind up to 1,000 corruption just to have that kind of difficulty? In Slormancer, access to difficult content is never the problem. If you want to push the bounds and see what your character can really do, there is something that is readily available to challenge you.
Yeah, and yeah, and it just being able to just choose when you go up in difficulty instead of like having to like grind an arbitrary number or having to get T16 maps or something like that, right? Is a very refreshing experience. And I think the thing is, I think it can kind of get away with that slightly because it's a single player game.
You can
I
get away
think
with so many things in a
yeah,
single player
and
game.
I think if it was like just one to one introduced in like a game like Last Epoch, it would break the economy essentially.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, because like we're already doing empowered monoliths at like level 70, right?
Mm.
So, and I think that something like that could be introduced, but it's a good inspiration. Shouldn't be one to one, otherwise it would break the game.
There is one more thing that I really want to highlight for
Mhm.
the forge, for the arena thing that exists in Slormancer. And it's I think it's a little bit hidden. Like you might not think about it at first, but I think it's the reason that it stands out as so much more fun, and I want to do it over and over than the arena in Last Epoch.
Mhm.
There is no downtime. There is no loading
Yeah.
screen. There's always enemies. The most downtime is when the menu comes up with those three options. Which one do you want to click on? Because they're actually impactful and you're actually going to read them and think about the rewards that come along with them. If you want no downtime, those are going to be basically
I'll
no
be
downtime.
honest, with my current build, I kind of just pick every single movement speed modifier, so there's even less downtime.
Yeah, like make the monsters faster. It's fun.
Yeah.
Uh, like think about Arena and Last Epoch. Think about how many loading screens there are. There's a pause every 5 waves. You got to go smack the barrels and click on some stuff. Maybe you're ignoring that, but and the monsters spawn really far away from you. The
And I
arenas
think
are
they did
kind of
an
big.
insane job on the war chest mechanics.
The
Like the
war
war
chest feels
chest
really good.
mechanic,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it's so interactive in how you want to get it to benefit you, right? It's not just like you're waiting for that random modifier. It's like if I want this specific thing, I can warp my forge chest in a way where I get that. Now the problem is, of course, it is kind of RNG and like every 3 choices, but you get one every wave. And the biggest difference is like I'm not just randomly adding something to the chest. I'm kind of crafting my own loot box, quote unquote, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that feels very satisfying to get to the end. And it's not for the faint of heart. If you die, you lose your chest.
You
You're
lose
dead.
like 95% of your rewards, right? Like you get
No,
some.
you lose everything.
No,
You lose
there's
everything.
something that you keep, right?
Well, you keep
Like
XP. That's all you get. You
no,
keep XP.
you keep like 10% of the something that drops you or something.
Oh, it might be the Reaper stuff. The
I think
Reaper stuff.
that's it. Like the Reaper stuff that like
it might be
came
the Reaper
specifically for
stuff,
your
yeah.
weapon.
I'm talking about everything else though.
Oh, you mean the 95? Yeah, you you lose pretty much everything if you die.
Yeah, I'm talking about everything that's actually in the chest, like the actual items and
Listen,
stuff.
Dread, it sounds like you haven't died recently enough. Could you go ahead and die real quick?
Oh, I've done plenty of dying. Dude, I've been working really hard to make this build. Like, I've been challenged essentially. Like, I've been like, I'll be honest, I'm kind of playing right now because it takes forever.
Wow, he's playing right now. No, it's
so
actually
long.
not a YouTube loop that we have in the corner. It's actually Dread's
no.
live gameplay while he's talking.
I know, right? I wish. But yeah, like I was trying to do Wrath 7 on the Forge. I was getting my ass kicked. It was actually difficult. I needed to I'm like, okay, I need to upgrade my gear. I'll be back.
And like if you went from Forge 7 or like Wrath 7 to Wrath 8, that would be a huge increase in difficulty.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So good luck getting there. We actually made it through our list of topics. We talked about builds that we're playing, the leveling stuff, leveling your alternate characters, alternate campaign, your alternate skills. We talked about the classes and the differences, the identities there. Talked about Slormreapers, which is one of our favorite mechanics from it, about catching all the Pokemon and leveling everything up. Talked about the crafting system, which to me, I really like the crafting system. I think it's quite good.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about the 3.5 endgame systems that exist in the game right now, and it's early access. So it looks like there's space for 3 more endgame systems as well. I'm excited for this game. It keeps getting better. It's really good.
Yeah, I agree. And if you want, I'm going to link it in chat. I did do an interview with the lead developer about a month or two ago, before when the Great Forge update was announced. Just give me a second here. Let me find it.
Well, let's make sure that we put that interview in the description of this video.
Yeah,
we'll put that on what do you call it, on Spotify as well, so everyone has what they need.
Yeah. If you guys want to see what their future visions of the game, why they make some of the choices that they make and stuff like that. I was very thorough with that.
Game's pretty fun. Kind of like it. It's nice that we get to talk about Slormancer and also talk about the intersection with Last Epoch. What feels good, what doesn't feel good. Maybe things that belong in Last Epoch, and maybe even things that don't.
So I think these games can bounce off of each other, right?
Oh, for sure. Like, listen, not every game needs to appeal to every single person. If you like Path of Exile, go play Path of Exile. If you like Last Epoch instead, like, there are too many good games out there. Like, people are cranking out indie games all the time. There's too many good games out there to just like lock yourself into one. Diversify the kind of fun you're having. If you like Last Epoch, take a week off like I did and like Dread did. Go play a different game. Maybe pick up Slormancer as well. The game has been wicked fun so far.
Yeah, and like the biggest problem though with Slormancer though, in terms of getting actual feedback and stuff like that for LE, is it is a single player game and it's allowed to do things because of that. And that's like a big difference between like the games. Is like the fact that they don't have to care about an economy. They don't have to care about power creep, because it's just a single player game. It's like have fun. And that's like one of the biggest differences, and I'm fine with that.
Wait, what's that word that you keep using?
Fun?
Fun? Fun? In my video game?
Yeah, I know, right?
Sir.
But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for today, folks.
I think so. So this is episode 15 of the Epic Epoch podcast. Been talking about Slormancer, some of the similarities and differences with our main game, Last Epoch here. Dread, thank you so much, not only for providing the footage here that we've been looking at on screen, but also for joining me for the podcast.
I also bought him the game, by the way.
You did actually buy me the game too.
Yes,
I appreciate that too. Twitch chat, if you're watching here live, thank you so much. Remember, this will go up on YouTube and Spotify as well. If you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube and Spotify, make sure to let us know so that we can make sure that your viewing and listening experience is as good as possible. So that wraps it up for us. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time.